Welcome everybody to the Spring 2019 School of Landscape Architecture Speaker Series. Our first speaker is the landscape architect, Kate Stickley. It's fortuitous that we host Kate tonight, as tonight is the vernal equinox, the last day of winter, and Kate is a landscape architect deeply connected to nature. Kate is a founding partner of Arterra Landscape Architects. Arterra has been going strong for about 15 years. She will tell you more about that when she gets into her talk. Their work's been featured in at least 10 books and over a dozen magazines, zines, and blogs. Kate was profoundly influenced by the hours she spent clearing brambles for the trails in the woods behind her home at Brandywine River Valley in southeastern Delaware. Or actually, it would be northeastern Delaware. Yeah. Right, I'm mixing my states with Pennsylvania.
Yeah, you were thinking, yeah.
This might have been the first hint that Kate was destined to become a landscape architect. After spending 4 very cold years studying and receiving her degree in landscape architecture at Michigan State University, Kate moved to the south of France, where she practiced, South Florida.
South Florida first, yeah.
Where she practiced large-scale resort design. She worked on projects in the southeastern U.S. and throughout the Caribbean. Seeking another dramatic change of climate and scenery, Kate moved to the south of France. While Kate was living and practicing landscape architecture in the stunning light of Provence, for another 4 years, her love of Mediterranean and water-wise plants took root. Throughout her work overseas, Kate experienced the tradition and mastery of old-world craftsmanship. She designed and collaborated with artisans who learned their trade from their fathers and grandfathers. It is this love of craft that is so evident in Arterra's detailing and design. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to have her here, was specifically to talk about the mastery in craft. Kate's a member of the American Society of Landscape Architects, the Association of Professional Landscape Designers, Build It Green, and the National Association of Women Business Owners. She's certified as a green building professional and is continuously seeking ways of incorporating sustainable design into all facets of Arterra's projects. If asked what makes her happiest, the answer is clear: being outdoors. She loves running, biking, and backpacking in the wildlands of California, which continue to connect Kate to the land. If she must be inside, she's most likely cooking or painting or trying to master the New York Times Sunday crossword puzzle. Please join me in welcoming Kate Stickley.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for the introduction. Jeff and I talked a bit about what might be of interest to talk about. My focus is residential scale landscape architecture, which I am passionate about. And we came up with the title Building Craft, Creating Legacy. And turn on my timer here so I don't go terribly over.
Do you want me to do it?
No, that's okay. So I looked up the definition of craft, and because we toss that word around a lot, and it's the skill of knowing how to make things. And there's so much skill in what we do as landscape architects and how we make a whole variety of things. And I'm going to show you a number of projects where we apply that. And the other part that brought me to residential landscape architecture was creating legacy. And legacy for us is creating a garden that will be remembered for generations. It was thousands of acres, hundreds of acres. It was fitting golf courses and hundreds of units on. It was a great puzzle to work all this out. But the projects went on for 15, 20 years. Sometimes it took 10 years for a project even to be built by the time you did the master planning, got the funding, did the first phase of development. And that was all great, but then I was never connected to the end user. And for residential design, it's about relationships as well as the skill and the craft of landscape architecture. The thing for me, I love connecting with people, whether it's working with an architect or an arborist on a project, finding a good fit for a client to work with us at Arterra. Those relationships really fuel and feed the work to make it meaningful to us. So in talking about personal craft development, I've been at it for about 39 years. So I had 4 years at Michigan State. I had 6 years in South Florida. I had 4 years in France. And then in San Francisco, about 9 years before we started Arterra. And I met my business partner who had a similar experience working for EDAW, which is now AECOM, in large-scale planning. So it was right after the Oakland fires, and there was a lot of residential work to be had because of insurance money. So the craft of residential design and what it offers is a little bit different than some of the other aspects and other markets of landscape architecture. We have the opportunity to build a skill base, and when you're doing a residential project, you're doing everything from soup to nuts, from site analysis to grading and drainage, massing and siting of buildings, everything all the way down to actually getting it built. And to me, that was really wonderful to have the ability to do all of that and build that on it. And the timeline that I referred to earlier is that it's a relatively short timeline when it comes to seeing something done. Our biggest projects that are more estate size might be 5 years from beginning of design to finishing construction. And in that amount of time, you get to see how things look. Did we get the scale right? Would I do that again that way? Or how could we build upon that better? So that's another reason why we love residential design. In talking about clients, we're creating lifestyle for families. We're creating legacy gardens for retirees that want to have that special place for their grandkids to come back to every summer. And we have families that want to pass this residence down from generation. And have that kind of impact on people's lives is really an honor. So that's the legacy part that was really compelling to us. I talked a little bit about the history. This is a brief photo essay of the history of Arterra. That's our office in Potrero Hill. When I first started, we were talking with the general contractor on a project site. Vera Gates was my founding co-partner. She's now retired, and we have a third partner, Gretchen, who's top right, far right, who's now a co-partner with me. So we started small and built. We have our partnership of 3 that lasted a number of years before Vera retired 2 years ago. And this is, our team is now up to 16. And dogs are welcome in the office. So partnership, part of it is building a team within the office and working with others, but also as a business owner, working with a partner, knowing that you have a similar eye. This is a series of photos that Gretchen and I, my business partner, took separately, not knowing that the other person was also taking a similar photo. Project site photos having to do with cats. We had 2 separate trips, New England and Italy, and we were taking photographs of clothing because all aspects of design can inform your design, whether it's color or texture or pairings of materials. Peru and Italy, patterns. Getting out into nature, Peru and Venice. And just looking at what makes a place feel so special. And we found a number of very, very common elements. So the first project I wanted to share with you was a new residence up in Marin. It was LEED gold, and goal was net zero. In this site plan, you'll see that it was on a knife ridge. So the hillside here, the house sits on top of it, had very little flat land. All of the areas that you see in yellow here is a living roof. So that became their main gathering space because on the ground, the land fell pretty dramatically to either side. We had a very strong concept of trying to create a Zen-like retreat. And what you'll see on the 2 drawings on the left is the upper level, which is the top left, which is the living roof. And then the lower level, bottom left, is the interior courtyard and the vanishing edge pool. The larger image to the right is how these 2 gardens, one up in the sky, one on the ground, relate to each other. So making sure that the materials, the design vocabulary, how we were laying out things really related from the ground into the sky was incredibly important to create that Zen-like peaceful retreat. Construction, looking straight at Mount Tam, we get involved from the very beginning from when the building's staked throughout construction. That's the edge of the Vanishing Edge pool on the lower right. And this is an angle of the living roof, which is only on 6 to 8 inches of soil. So there's a lot of really great things that we can bring to the team. The architects wanted to have a living roof because this end of the building here, second story, was going to look over a flat roof. How interesting is that? We took the meadows of Mount Tam as our clue and guide and came up with a native plant palette that would survive on 6 inches of soil. And it did amazingly well. These very small pictures show the process of constructing a green roof. And this is actually a sheet from one of our portfolios where we will walk our clients through what that looks like. What you'll see here is the waterproofing being installed. Then they flood test it for 72 hours, like a bathtub. If that doesn't leak, then it's handed over to the landscape contractor, who then puts down drain mat. We did lightweight concrete on styrofoam to keep the loads on the roof very light. Underground KISS irrigation came in, planting medium, and then setting the plants. And finished photos. Working very closely with the architects, and you think about roofs, there are a lot of vents that come up, and they're usually galvanized caps and not very pretty to look at. So we worked with the architects to design these shrouds that pick up the materials and the forms of the roof so that these become like little floating lanterns in the landscape. So looking at constraints and turning them into opportunities and bringing the vocabulary of the building out into the landscape so that they really are seamless in how they interact and integrate with each other. We're always looking for opportunities to come up with new ideas, and we had a number of innovation points for the LEED Gold certification. The master bathroom window here, you could see in from the road down below. And instead of building a fence, what we had heard from the client was that she loved the redwoods. She loved that feeling of being in the woods, and building a wood fence just to screen the views felt like it would enclose her too much and separate her from what she really enjoyed. So we came up with a custom stainless steel and metal screen that is filled with dirt and sphagnum moss, and then we plugged it with plants. So that from looking inside from the bathtub, you can see it in progress, underway, and 2 years later, it's filled out pretty well. Also on this project, we did a sculpture tower, and she wanted to have some herbs and edible plants, and we thought, instead of going to buy a sculpture, let's design a focal point. So we worked with the metal fabricator. Scott from our office there is holding up the top urn that ended up getting cut in half. And then we actually wanted to see how this was worked, so we got out on site and we actually planted these ourselves. And this is the finished version with herbs and strawberries and things that they could pick. Another key element on this project was water management, and keeping the water on site and understanding the civil engineering, the drainage of things is really important. And we said, why hide it? So the roof runoff comes down, it goes through onto the ground, through the crevices in these large boulders that we had craned in, and then flows into the dry creek and then down into the detention basin. So a requirement that's to meet code becomes a feature and an interesting folly and part of the garden story. From here you can see the interior courtyard. They had doors that pocketed far left, pocket to the pool, then to the courtyard, and then in the second building back here so that they could open it up and have flexibility for entertaining. You can see a little bit of the green roof on the top on the right. And the last photo shows all of it together. And that ceanothus that's in the top right corner of the living roof, which can get to be a 6-foot shrub, is growing in 6 inches of soil. So right place, right plant. This next project is completely different. And these two projects happened right at the downturn in 2008. And they are the reasons why we were able to carry through the recession. We had two clients that were very passionate about having projects that could be used as inspiration for others. The first one was the net zero lead, and this one was more about being a patron of the arts. And my business partner, Vera, interviewed for this one, and she met the client, and she said, you know, I really didn't think the interview went that well, until at the end, as I was literally walking out to leave, and she said, so what would be your fantasy garden? And he said, Middle Earth. And she said, Middle Earth like in the Lord of the Rings? He said, yeah, and he's like a 6'7" foot guy. He's a big J.R.R. Tolkien fan. So lo and behold, working with the architect, we came up with a residence. It's a little faded here, but you can see the ring gesture here that organizes the whole project. Entry court here, entrance to the home. And the idea was that the house had annexes and created little spaces where it felt like a village. And it was meant to be very old world. So while these two projects were going on, we had Middle Earth going on and Zen Retreat going on at the same time, and everybody had a lot of fun with it. This one was, he was a fan of the quail, so we did a lot of research in quail habitat. We also wanted to be very water-wise, so underneath that auto court is a 40,000-gallon rainwater cistern. So there are two green roofs, and we collect the water off the main roof. It's stored. This liner went down. These concrete supports came in, and then you can see the garages here where the access to the house is. And all the water, we collect the water, the rainwater on this one, and bring it back into the garden. He also was a gentleman that was in his late 60s. He says, I don't want to wait 5 years for this garden to grow in. So we said, you realize if we plant this way, you're going to have to start pulling plants out in 3 years. He says, I don't care. So we had this wonderful time coming up with a native plant palette that was that could respond to the coastal conditions of Carmel. And we created, this building on the left has the green roofs on the top, which you can't see, but we also created a summer pond on the right that's full of frogs. And in particular, on this project, we worked with a lot of different artisans. We worked with ceramicists, metal artisans, a glass artist, an LED lighting consultant, mosaic artist, stonemasons, and we did a lot of work by hand. The client loved the iterative process. He thought it was just fabulous to be involved in the making of art. So on the left, you see a number of different renditions of the fountain. It has a metal base and a ceramic bowl. And so we worked with a ceramicist down in San Diego and a metal fabricator in Monterey County. On the other side of the house, we also did a similar version an element for a fire pit that spoke to the design of the entrance fountain. And here are some of Natasha's drawings in our office by hand of the little dragon armature that is expressed here and holding up this. So you can also see, you can barely see it, but there's the fountains on the other side. So working with proportion and scale, working with the artisans to understand how the materials can be used or not in their tolerances. I think the ceramicists had to build a new kiln to be able to fire these because these pieces were so large. And in an outdoor gazebo, we did an outdoor chandelier with LED lights and moonstones. So we have precious, semi-precious stones that when lit from these internal lights that you can't see because they're integrated into the hollow portions of the chandelier, glow at night. Some finials for the entry gate, some more designs. And then you'll see here, we couldn't plant directly underneath the cypress, so we came in with the mosaic pebbles. And an armillary, a sculpture. We worked with 3 different sculptors for this project. I'm not showing some of the other sculptures, but they're hidden within the garden. Mosaic artist that did this medallion there. And then in these depressions here are winter ponds, which also collect the water, slow the water down, rainwater down, and allow them percolate into the site. And then the very bottom left is the summer pond. Throughout the garden, there were excerpts of the book, various books, and we had them etched into the stone. So some of them are in Elvish, which is, and I don't know what they mean, but so they're little hidden delights. As you go down these garden paths, you come across these moments. This here is a picture of the living roof on top of the studio and the guest house. And then this was a ruinous portal that brought you back into the back garden. So the ring path that brings you through all the spaces in the garden have these moments of real wonder and delight. A current project that's underway now in Carmel is a fascinating one. We've been working very closely with the architect. It had to go through a rigorous design review board and through county permitting. Here we are looking at the raw site. Again, another knife ridge just littered with oaks. So working with the arborist was key and important. The only flat area in the site was this top here, and it fell down this way, and it falls down this way. And there were some good views, and some access came up through here. And having done the walking through the site, what I realized was we had enough grade change to, instead of having the garage here and having your first experience be the garage doors, which most people don't want, I said, let's bring this around here and come underneath and do a green roof on top. So we as landscape architects have an active dialogue with the civil engineers, with the architects, with the arborists, so that we can fully maximize what our clients' goals are in a very site-specific and site-sensitive way. Very early on, we were, by hand, taking a look at this. Is the auto court here, stairs up to the front door. Finding the front door oftentimes is part of our role, if you can't see it. Here's the green roof on top where you come around into the garage, and down here by the pool. And then looking back from the back part of the property this way, the vanishing edge of the pool cabana, the house, and the guest house were all part, and a very active dialogue of how these buildings could be placed, what angles to play off of. And very early on in the process, we saw that the main views were angled this way, down valley. And in the building design, there's a stone wall that comes through. And we said, why don't we anchor this like outriggers and have our site walls continue that architectural expression at that angle and be the reason for the shift in the pods of the building, and also give it reason for linking into the pool cabana and the pool area. We use SketchUp a lot, and it is a great design tool. And in this, what you'll see is the architectural wall that I was talking about is right here. And so how that came out and addressed the pool, we wanted to play with both the length of these site walls as well as their height to see how they would interact with the building. And right now, that stone wall comes all the way through. So the building has stucco, stone, and Corten steel. And it's under construction now. After that, we get into pool studies and pool paving diagrams, cutting sections to show the relationship of materials and grades to each other. So the upper terrace at the house, you come down the steps here to the pool level. And this retaining wall that held up this fairy grove of oaks felt like it needed to be its own place. So we looked at coming with completely different stone material and having to convince the architects that this was we wanted to create a different sense of place down by the pool, and talk them into letting us use a different stone down there than is used in the house and elsewhere. So here you can see, under construction, the vanishing edge basin. This will be the vanishing surface of the pool, the vanishing edge. Here's this dark stone that we were able to get through, and we're actually using some of it on the ground plane. And then the end wall here of the house stone It picks up again here. It's under scaffolding here, and it goes through the house. The stone wasn't inside the house yet in this shot. And then it scoots out the front. So really strong indoor-outdoor relationship and materiality. So even the best and most thoughtful design, you got to stay open to what the site's telling you. Because sometimes, even though you've really considered it well, you might miss something. So what you see in this picture is the view from the main terrace. Here's that site wall that comes coming through. You see a lot of dark green here. The pool bottom is going to be a dark plaster pool. And what do you think about this edge that's just the raw edge? It hasn't been tiled yet. How does that interact with the site? Does it feel like it blends into the site? Is it a barrier to the site in this color? Well, that's something we kind of got reminded of, luckily, before materials were ordered. We had this beautiful glass tile planned for that edge of the pool. And just by luck, it was going to take too long to get. So we said, great, we'll get some ceramic tile that matches that pool tile. And I went down to the site and I put them on the edge, and they're all these very minute shades of gray, and we want to get the perfect gray. I got home and I went to another project of ours, and I thought, we're completely blowing it. If this whole interior of the pool is this dark color here, and we put a light colored tile on here, we'll have exactly what's happening here, which would be this light colored stripe that separates you from the landscape. So this other project that we have under construction with a dark tile on the vanishing edge, you can see how your eye, especially if this is all dark plaster, your eye carries across the basin of the pool to the landscape. Over here, we said, okay, client, we think this is a really good idea, and why. Here is your pool plaster. Here's the pool stone. And this is the new tile color we'd like you to consider. And they agreed with us. So luckily, before that went in, we were able to make that revision and that improvement to the project. On the front side of the house, you can see the diagonal wall coming through the house, coming out to the site here. Here's the front door. And when you're entering into the site here, you have no idea the front door is behind this wall. So we really wanted to have a feature that would draw you in, aside from the steps, and that was this fountain. When we designed this, it came in at like $80,000. The client said, oh, that's a lot of money. Let's shelve the idea. And then, as they thought about it, they said, well, we'd probably need some sort of focal point there anyway, and we'd probably buy a piece of sculpture, and we really want to hear the sound of the water. Let's put it back in the budget. So it's under construction now. This is the sheet of construction, one of the sheets of the construction documents showing the plan view, and we'll talk about the basin aspect of it, the water weir, and this is going to be a Core 10 steel facade, so how we integrated the length and shape of the weir with the pattern piecing of the metal that's going onto the building right now was a really fun study back and forth with the architects. So working off of a site photo, trying to understand tops of walls, things go into CAD, they get studied by hand, they go back into CAD. It's a very fluid process. Having the ability to hand sketches is really critical and really helpful. So here we had the basin design. First it was going to be a vanishing edge, and then we were talking about how the concept of the basin and its depths, it was almost like a reverse topo map of a mountain, worked. We came up with a more angular version, and right now you can see how they've formed it up in its shape, and all of these are steps down. You can see after they strip the formwork how these are going to be underwater and the gradation within the basin itself. Front door here, this is before they put the stone on this wall here. This was about a month ago. When we were studying the weir portion of it, this was our first go at it. The architects gave us the facade piecing, and we were looking at how long that should be. We determined that we really wanted the weir, the curtain of water to be emanating from a joint within the pattern. It made it technically more interesting and easier to build. We also had some integration of how do we keep the water away from the building, because so we integrated a planter there. So this was the hand version. As the architects refined their piecing of the facade materials, we realized that on a project this size, that 36-inch wide weir was going to be minuscule. And so we kind of beefed it up to 6 feet. And so it now is this long. There'll be the separation of the horsetail between the water basin and the building. And here's a hand sketch, because the Corten is going to come down. You can't put Corten into water without having filtration issues. So this sketch shows how the Corten in red is going to come down and almost sandwich this stainless steel weir that was custom fabricated for this source feature. And here it's in place. I was just down there last week. Here's the weir. You can see the furring for where they're going to be applying the Corten panels on the building facade. So that's looking up the entrance step. This is going to be a window that looks out from the kitchen into this basin that the weir spills into. And then from the front door looking out, you can see this diagonal wall that's slicing through the building. This is our basin. This is our trench for our planting. And here's that water weir that has yet to be clad in Corten. So we worked with the water features designer, we worked with the structural engineer, we worked with the architect, we worked with the metal fabricator. We had the weir fabricator gave us videos of the weir with the water, and they wanted to understand how to dial up or down. Did we want a sheer curtain of water that didn't break? Did we want to have little dribbles? So they gave us videos. You could hear it, and you could see the water effect coming down, and we were able to share those with our clients, and they were absolutely thrilled to be involved in the process. Sometimes, when you're out on site so many times, you don't see something until you've been walking around the construction site for a while. And the clients actually had this request. This is the green roof. Our pool is going to be over here. And originally, this wall was continuous, and there was no way to get from the guest house back to the pool without going through the house. And they said, we'd really like to have a stair there. We said, okay. So pulling in the vocabulary materials, we said, well, wouldn't that be cool to have the stucco wall receive a Corten stair, echoing the materials on the facade of the building. So we worked up an idea of having no seams. So this piece would be fabricated to here. It would be received by this piece underneath that comes down to here. There are 3 pieces of this. And that sketch went then to the structural engineer who gave us the information to create the construction drawing. So again, with the engineering, with our concept, talking to the artisan, can they transport that length in their truck? You know, that's why it's in 3 pieces. So the craft of building this stair was fascinating to learn about how thick the steel should be, how it needed to be pieced, how they recommended not having it too long so that it could actually be installed and carried to the site. And here's the stair just going in. We have yet to get into planting. That's going to be in the next 2 months. Our planting plan is almost all natives, but we had to come up with some trees that were removed early on because of the recommendation of the arborist. This is the front. This is coming into the entrance fountain. And these key trees here needed to go in first. And so the process is to get photographs or tag them ourselves at nurseries. So we have the Coast Live Oak in the multi-branch form. This is a valley oak, and then the native dogwood that all are going to come into here. So with that information, we are very involved in the planting process, which is a whole separate lecture that I'd be happy to give another time. But just to let you know, the trees go in first, And these diagrams, we asked the contractor, because the client wanted to see, and the architect, how these masses of vegetation work with the building. So these are story poles for each of the trees. And this cross piece here is the dimension of the diameter of the head or the canopy of the tree. And you can also see the size of it on the ground. So that's where the multi-branch coast live oak is going in. These little ones here are the skinnier valley oaks. So getting involved in the selection of the trees, the actual fine-tuning of the placement on the site is really fun. And the trees go in first. Eventually, this is not this project, but one that's just finishing up in Ross. But planting day is a blast. And you can see how the image on the far left, it can be a little daunting. You come onto a site and they have all the plant material. And it takes a little while to walk around, place them, get them set in a way where it's following the plan, but then you're also adapting to how the plants are looking as they're coming in and site conditions, and then just a recently planted photo. So these have yet to really take off. That one is a series of natives also. But this project, that's going to happen in the next 2 months down there before it gets too hot. This is down in Woodside. It was a renovation. So it was a house that existed. They added a wing to it. There were some existing retaining walls that were going to be too expensive to take out. So our task was to come with new retaining walls to bury the old ones. This one, we worked very closely with the architects and the existing site conditions to play off the angles of the building. So there were many schemes of the existing pool. This was a guest house that was relocated, a new garage, a new wing, and the new wing had this angle. And we convinced everyone wanted everything to be orthogonal and lining up with the pool. And we said if we tip this angle open, it's just going to embrace the site in a much different way. And it's made all the difference in the world, and a very active and dynamic composition. The other part of their dilemma was front door is here, and you come in and you can't see it. So water feature here to help bring interest and focal point into here. Glass walls here so that you can see through. Major kitchen garden, orchard, and chicken run back there. The edibles and entertaining were really important. So here's a view from inside the foyer looking back at our retaining walls and our water feature here. And this water feature was board form concrete with metal spillways on two sides. One side that relates to the first view that you'd see from the auto court, and this for the interior view. Different angles. So the view on the views to the left are what you see when you come in, and that draws you into the front door. And the view to the right is what you see from inside. We get involved on every aspect of design during construction. Scott and Donnie are standing on top as planting was being laid out to take a view from up there. Every summer we do tours with our team, and we go to usually 3 to 4 built projects or projects that are under construction, so that everybody has the benefit of getting out there, even if they haven't worked on the project. So here we're talking with the contractor in the hat about the pumps and filtration system for the fountain, and team members there. In the back, the fire pit, also a number of studies of how that block of limestone might be divided with metal seams, and ultimately they chose a very simple version of it. And that fire pit is here. And then bringing other stone blocks into the landscape so that there's a reference and framework where the materials all start to relate to each other. Many projects have recreational elements in addition to pools, bocce courts. And this one, the kitchen garden, was really fun. It became a whole entertainment area. There's a work table that we designed, big production garden. In the distance, you'll see the pizza oven with an arbor and lights hanging. There's an outdoor grill. That round fountain in the foreground is an organizing element for spiraling you out on the paths out to the rest of the landscape, as well as relating and becoming the focal point for the entertainment area. And then when we laid that out, the architect said, well, what we could do is put a caterer's kitchen or an ice cream bar in the back of the garage. So in creating this really compelling space, it informed them to come up with a really interesting solution for helping them entertain by modifying the architecture based on what we'd come up with in the landscape. So in closing, you can see this is the entertainment area, that round fountain, ridgeline in the distance, the fire pit over there. Our orchard is all in here. The compositions all work together, and each of the projects are different in style, different context, different people using it, different architectural style, different climates. So there's never a dull moment. And we never really repeat things. Oftentimes clients will say, well, what's your style? And our style is contextual. It responds to you. So that's the last slide. I'm happy to take any questions or go back to any parts of this if you have questions about specific projects or elements of what I've spoken about. The question was whether we work with clients, contractors, maintenance people for setting up maintenance plans and making sure the garden survives. The answer is yes to all of that. We do a set of maintenance guidelines at the end of a project. We like to have the ability to either walk the client or their maintenance crew person or their gardener through so they understand what the concept is as trees are being pruned or not pruned. We are constantly battling people blowing off leaves for mulch where it needs to be left to decompose and regenerate the soil. So yes, we work really closely. In fact, today I was just down in Los Altos Hills for a project that we finished a year ago with a new maintenance company because the current maintenance company wasn't communicating well with the client. And Ruskin Gardens, who does some really fine maintenance of gardens, is on site. And there were some plant failures, not many. And so we were walking with them, with the client, to decide, do we replace that plant with the same plant? Or is it something that's more systematic that just isn't well suited to the site? And we counted on their experience, having been gardeners in the area for many, many years. Is this unique to this site? Is this always going to be a problem? And they came back with, nope, this is that particular plant. It was an acacia cousin it. 1 out of 6 oftentimes dies, but it doesn't mean you should have a wholesale replanting of it. So being very transparent with our clients also engenders trust. We're not trying to hide anything. We're not experts. You know, as well planned as we can make our plant selections, there are gophers, there are deer, there are windstorms. And so working, you know, it's different with a building than it is with a garden. The garden is just starting when it's planted. It's not the end of things. So we do not charge to come back for those visits with our clients. We feel it's a real integral part to our education as designers to see what works and what hasn't worked. We educate our clients that there is going to be a certain amount of attrition on each job. Not every plant is going to survive, and it's not going to mean that it wasn't installed correctly or it wasn't designed correctly. So managing expectations with the clients, and then saying, please, you know, if you're running into an issue where a series of the same plant, you're having problems with it, let us be involved with helping select the replacement plant so the concept can still be held together. So great question.
Lisa says, I'm considering incorporating a green roof for my Studio 2 project, which is located in Portland, Oregon. Are there any special conditions I should consider? The project is for a community center for refugees and 4 attached residential apartments for newly arrived refugees. I would also like to incorporate a community garden and kitchen.
Picking plants that are climate appropriate and low maintenance because it is a community garden. I think the weeding and the maintenance of a green roof is very particular. So it would need to be a skilled group of people that are maintaining it. I'm trying to think of Portland, it gets more water. does get a little bit of snow. So making sure that the freeze, the temperature variation is accounted for the type of plant material, because it's going to get more, it's going to get hotter hots and colder colds in a thin layer like that. And then the community garden aspect of it would be trying to make sure that you're planting appropriate amount of planting that can be maintained. We've done projects with schools, and a school will be real gung-ho about creating edible plant gardens, but then what happens in the summer when the teachers go away and the kids aren't there? Who's going to be maintaining it? So maybe starting incrementally with beds that could be added to over time, so they can get their feet underneath them for creating the edible, the production garden plants in a phased way, so that they know they've got it covered and they're not building too much too soon. Would be a couple.
If it's a refugee community, it might matter who the refugees are and where they're from.
Yeah.
So people from different places in the world have different traditions in both how they use the landscape, how they produce food, and what kinds of food they might want to have, particularly if it's a transition from their country to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So there obviously are only, if you're coming from a hot, dry climate in the world and you're going to Portland, there's going to be some disconnect in what you can do. But I think it's really worth exploring, because there may be things that they could grow that remind them of home, so to speak. And then also, I would think the age groups, like if it's a lot of families,
Mm-hmm.
having community gardens where kids, it's really accessible to children if they want to go out, if that's something that they would do. That kind of thing would help too.
One other element on that, we did a sweet little garden in Menlo Park, and the grandfather, the grandson, and the parents all would have a communal meal once a week, where they would go out into the garden, they'd build a menu about what was currently mature and ripe. And so all of a sudden, just the desire to have an edible garden turned into a real cross-generational activity that brought the grandson and the grandfather closer together, because they became the ones driving the menu. So the comment
Right.
about what foods might be able to be grown from whichever communities or countries they're from, and then maybe it being a potluck dinner or something that was a community building event based on what's grown in the garden could be really neat.
The other resource you might think about is the University of Sheffield in England. They have a program, the landscape architecture program, that specifically studies refugees, and they're doing a project called I think it's Refugees for Parks, or Parks for Refugees, and they really look at the different ways that people from different cultures use public space and other kinds of landscape spaces. And you might check them out, because some of their research might be relevant to what you're doing. All right. Well, thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Kate. It was a pleasure to have you. And we'll see you all at the next Wednesday for Nick Goddard from Service Design. All right. Bye-bye.